In this video, I'm going to go over creating a basic asset. In this case, it's going to be a bookshelf, and it's going to be based on this project by Alex Mann, who very kindly shared his project with me. So I kind of saw how he made it, and it's really cool. So I'm just going to go through the basic principles of what he did to create this super cool thing. Just go and find this video on it's on Vimeo. Just search for Alex Mann. Anyway, it's really cool. So I'll show you how to do this, and let's get going. So this is my very amateurish attempt at it. The only difference is I've packed this up as an asset. So that means that we've got like there's only one place. There's one place for all the controls, and it's we'll black box it. So people can't mess around with it. So you select anywhere, and you get the asset controls. You don't get sent to a mesh or a mash node or whatever. So no one can mess around with bits they shouldn't. So we can control like the bookshelf width with just one slider, and then we've got the I've published some color controls so that we can make this as garish as we like. Same thing for these and whatever. Then there's this transform node down here which we can move and kind of rotate. So that's kind of like that's it really. It's as simple as that. But what's cool is that this is kind of live, and it can be resized to whatever you're doing, and it can be reused. Just swap the models out because this is Mash, so you can swap the models out at any time. Job done. So I'm just gonna show you the principles, and then you can go nuts. You can make ladders and fences and rope bridges and railings, decking and colonnades and whatever you want. With this kind of thing. So. Let's just copy the two models that we'll need, and we'll start a new scene. So, like so, and I'm just going to paste those in, and then I will just quickly fix the names. It's not really a slat, it's a piece of wood, but anyway. So here are our two models, expertly created, I think you'll agree. This is just supposed to represent some wood, and then this here is our book. So let's select our book, and we'll just go create Mesh Network. This is the Mesh editor. If you don't know where the Mesh editor is, here. So just go create Mesh Network, which creates our book. First thing I'm actually going to show you, to be honest, first thing I'm going to show you is actually I've moved the pivot point. So the book pivot point is in this bottom corner down here, and when I created that pivot point, I baked it. In fact, it's actually not in the right place. If I move that to that corner, what you do is you go modify bake pivot. So you move it. If you move a pivot point on an object that's in the Mesh network, make sure you bake it. Same thing goes. Actually, there's a whole tutorial on pivot points on my my YouTube channel. So if you don't bake a pivot, there's actually some other ways you can do it by grouping and moving things in a group. Just go and watch that tutorial if you don't know about pivot points in Mash, because it's something that might trip you up just because of the way that Maya does things. Anyway, with that done, let's hide that, and then here's our Mash network with our books in. And I'm going to spread these out over the positive Z axis, like so. So we'll put a distance of, say, 30 in here. And our book, as you can see, here's one world unit. This grid spacing is one world unit. The book is half a world unit wide. So that means we can get 60 books into our 30 world units, like so. So there are our books. And pretty good, pretty useful, whatever. And that done, we can, what's next? Let's add our random node. So we're going to just get a random node, and I'm just going to give no random positions in the Y and no random positions in the Z, but we'll do a tiny little bit of random positions in the X, just so that we have like slightly like disorderly books. There you go. And if I turn on occlusion, we'll just get a slightly better look at that. Let's do that. And we'll have a little bit of random scale in the Z. So if I just do a bit of random scaling, you see that the books all grow slightly. It's because we've got absolute scale turned on, which means that the scaling is only positive. And then we can just have a little bit of random height and a little bit of random depth, just so we've all got kind of different looking books here. Now the problem is that our adding to the random scale here has made our books has made our books like slightly wider. Some of our books are slightly wider, which means they're intersecting. So what we can do is we can add an offset node here. We're just going to add an offset node, like so. We can take some scale off all the books as well, just to get rid of any intersections. So we've got some gaps between the books there, and because we've got a little bit gaps between the books, we might be able to play a little bit with some rotations. Nope, wrong axis. That little bit. So all our books aren't perfectly upright. They're all slightly, well, like between a 0 and 1 degree angle. Anyway, something like that. So that done. Now that's our kind of books created for one shelf, and let's now duplicate the bookshelves up. So we had a replicator node to do this. You can actually add a mesh network into a new mesh network, and then you can just use the distribute node to kind of like create shelves. But doing it all inside one network with the replicator node can sometimes be easier. So if we put, say, 5 in here, and we have like 4 shelves, or maybe 5's too much, let's put 4 in there. Oh, we have 4 shelves, there you go. Cool, so 4 replicants, a height of 4, just because we're happy with that. So it's going to come in handy later if you want to add a control for the height of the bookcase. Let's now, oh, actually, you've noticed that the bookcase, all of the kind of like random positions and rotations and things are the same for every shelf, and that's because if you look at the mesh editor, the random happens before we duplicate them. If we grab the random node here and we move it above the replicator, it means that the random gets assigned after the points have been replicated, which means that they all get different randoms. So that's just something you want to watch out for. The order that things happen in is really important. So cool, that's done. Now let's create a visibility node, and we're going to turn some points off. So I'm going to create a fall off here, and then the fall off, which you can get to through this little connections button here, or you can double click on it in the visibility node. So in the visibility node here, you can double click on this, or you can get to through here, or you can get to it through here. Lots of ways to get there. I've changed this to be a cube, and I'm just going to invert the fall off so that we're just going to turn a few books off. I'm just going to make the inner zone to be the full size of this, so there's no confusing kind of extra lines on the screen, because they're not important for a visibility node, because they're kind of on, or they're either on or they're off. And we're just going to make a gap somewhere in our shelving. Let's say here, right. And then in this gap, we're going to put some books that are all kind of like on an angle on their side. So that's a visibility node. And then, let's finally add a color node. So we add a color node, and we can make this kind of any color we like, and give ourselves kind of like a tiny bit of random if you want to just differentiate between our books slightly, a bit of random saturation, a bit of random value, something like that. And then this can be piped into a shader. So obviously you wouldn't have your pages this color. So you would have 2 shaders on your book, and the shader for the book cover would inherit CPV from the mesh network. And the way that you do that, there's a tutorial on my YouTube channel, and it's like using the color node with Arnold, Mental Ray, and I think I did V-Ray, but Arnold and Mental Ray definitely did. Yeah, that'll explain how you do that. Anyway, so we've created a gap in our books. Now what we're going to do is I'm just going to duplicate the entire mesh network, and then we'll rename this one. We'll name this one just normal book network, and then we'll rename this one leaning book network, like that. And then in this network, we have a we already have the fall off here. I'm going to turn off invert, but on the offset here, I'm going to lean all our books over like so. So all our books are going to get leaned over, and I'm going to move them up slightly, because when I leaned them over, you see that they kind of went through where the shelf's going to be. So we need to raise them up a little bit, like so. And then the other thing that you'll notice is that the visibility fall off is kind of like in the wrong place, or the wrong scale anyway, because our books are leaning over. We don't want to have our books intersecting, so we actually need this fall off to be smaller than the other one. But what we can do, we want that, yeah, let's just kind of like, let's leave that. Let's just declare victory on that. And we can parent these two fall offs together, so we can move them around together. So if I move them down, you can see where the gap's going on. So there you go. Right, so that's done. We've kind of got our little leaning over books, and then what we could do, we could also say that in the leaning book network, those, if I just go back to the Mesh editor, leaning book network, over in the offsets here, we can actually just like move these books back slightly, which is the x-axis, so we can kind of like offset them back inside the shelf slightly, like so. Right, and then, actually they're kind of intersecting a little bit, so we could just move them just a touch that way, just to get rid of that intersection. So we've got some leaning over books, and yeah, so wherever these books are, the other ones won't be, because they've got the fall-offs parented to each other. And then we can like play with the colours here a little bit. If we wanted to, we could say that these books would be this horrible blue. I don't know. Let's just make them slightly ever so slightly different. I don't know what I'm doing. Whatever I do is going to be ugly, so just just live with it. Yeah, so yeah, let's just like, so horrible. We'll do that. We'll call it that. It's not so offensive. It's just wrong. Anyway, so that done. We'll just say that they are our books, and then I'm just going to finally add our last network, which is going to be in this case, it's going to just be our shelves, but of course you can also add another network for the ends of the bookshelf as well. But I'm not going to do that just because it's pretty self-explanatory once you've done this. So we'll add a mesh network, which is with our piece of wood, and we're just going to call this shelves network. And we don't want 10 points, we want 1, and that doesn't matter at all. So here is our piece of wood, and what we want to do is, in this network, we're just going to add an offset node, like, nope, that's not it node. Add an offset node like so, and we're going to, let's just try scaling this. So if we scale this to say 60, which is the width of our network, you see that we're about the right width. The trouble is, if we kind of like, if we reposition our piece of wood so that it's kind of like in the right place and it's the right width, remember that the piece of wood actually has a pivot point as well. So if I show that piece of wood here, notice the pivot point's in the corner. So that pivot point got moved and then baked. Remember, modify, bake pivot. Which meant that we could then, like, it'll be scaled from its corner when it's scaled out. So that done, notice that if we've kind of got the bookshelf end in a nice position on this end, it doesn't quite make it to the other end, which means that instead of being 0.5 scene units across, which is what the bookshelf end is, we actually need to make it ever so slightly wider than that. So we can just like do that, add a tiny little bit to the scale Z, which means it just pokes out the other side. And in fact, we could put 2 on there, right? And then we've got that comfortable width to then put the uprights. So on the offset, we'll just move this back a little bit. Whoops, move it back that way a little bit, just so it's kind of even. And we need to move it down because it'll be intersecting the books there. So just put it down like so, just a touch. And then we can add Replicator. So we go to add Replicator, and then I can't remember the values, but was it 4 and 4? Anyway, we want 5. So, because we want the top of our bookshelf as well. So there we go, and kind of like we'll call that kind of done for our as far as our network's concerned. And the next part will be turning this into an asset, which we can then easily control. Okay, so this bit is pretty simple, especially if you've used Maya assets before. But the first thing we need to do before we set up the asset is actually to create a controller null for the whole bookshelf. So let's get started with that. And I'm just going to create a Nurbs curve to do that. And it's very important that you leave the scale of the Nurbs curve at 1. So if you scale it up, freeze the transforms. But I'm actually just going to change the radius of it here just to avoid having to do that. So right, so created a Nurbs curve, and this is going to be our mover. So the way that you move mesh networks around, you can't move a repro mesh. That's not possible. So don't try it. The reason for that is just because the second you can move a repro mesh, it will mean that fall-offs affect the wrong positions. So it's easier for users if they can't do something that will break everything. So yeah, let's so the way that you move a mesh network is by adding a transform node. So if you add a transform node, it's going to break everything to begin with, but don't panic, it's fine. So we'll add a transform node to all three networks. I'm just going to color these networks just because I can. These colors are saved with the scene, so when you come back, it just sometimes makes it easier to recognize what's what if there's a color. So anyway, we add transform nodes to all the networks. So we go transform, and we go transform, like so. Now, we want this Nurbs curve here to be attached to all three transform nodes. So we go, this Nurbs curve is going to drive, we drag it onto the controller null here, it's going to drive all three. So we go transform, and then we drag the Nurbs circle onto the controller null, and then we grab the first transform we made, and then we drag the Nurbs circle on like so. The next thing we do is we have to do a bit of reordering. Watch what happens, because if I move the mesh network, hold on, it's not broken yet. I need to break it first. I'm going to get the visibility nodes, the visibility fall-offs here, and I'm going to parent them underneath the Nurb circle here. And now when I move, notice that we've got this kind of weird double transformation happening. No good. So that's because our transform node is happening after all of this kind of all of the other operations in our mesh network. And the transform needs to happen just after the distribute in this case, because we're using a replicator. And the main reason for this is because if you noticed on some nodes in the mesh network, we have this transformation space, world and local. Well, the replicator doesn't have this. The replicator is not aware of world and local space. It only has world space. And so that's a definitely limitation that we will get fixed. But in the meantime, if you move the transform down below the replicator, so just drag it underneath it like so. So you distribute, come on, and then you replicate, so like so. And then now if we move, we're getting no double transforms. So we can now move and we can rotate our network and all is good. Right. So you don't have to be done at this point, by the way, with your mesh network. You can always create extra things. Like, so we've got our normal books or whatever, normal book network. We could create another fall-off object here if we wanted to, and you could change the fall-off on this to be hold on, I think I just need to do something. I need to, where am I? I've confused myself. Hold on, bear with me. So this one here, we want to do that. Right, okay. Sorry. I wanted to have two fall-off objects that on the same node, and I had an invert fall-off on one of the nodes when actually I wanted to invert the whole node's effect. So sorry about that for the confusion. Right, so I'm just gonna inelegantly scale this and position it so that we've kind of like got some like a gap in the shells basically. So we'll just call that a gap in the shells. Move that so it's in the good position. Right, there we go. So recognizable. So that there is causing a gap in the shells. Anyway, so now let's set up our controller null. So we're just going to call this bookcase control, and then with the if you select the bookcase control and then go onto the bookcase controller here and then select it, make sure you select it before you add an attribute, otherwise it could get added to whatever node you've got selected. Go add attributes, and then we're going to add an attribute here called bookshelf width. Float and scalar, so the defaults for that. So we go OK, and then we've got this new attribute down here called bookshelf width. Now, why are we adding an attribute down here only to then add an asset later? And the reason is the reason for that is because we want to we want to do a little bit of, just a tiny little bit of math. So we just need to kind of multiply some numbers by 2, and that's it actually. So, and then what we can do is that we can then promote this to our asset. So I'm going to put 30 in here, bookshelf width 30, and if you may remember from the very beginning, our distribute nodes here, we had a distance of 30 and then a number of 0.60. So you can probably guess what's going to happen. If I bring up the node editor, and I drag in our bookcase control, just clear it, add the bookcase control. So this node here has our bookshelf width on it. I'm going to go and find a couple of nodes, and it's going to be the distribute nodes. So I'm going to get the leaning bookshelf and the normal bookshelf distributes, and I'm going to drag those, middle mouse, drag them into the node editor. And so, as you may well have guessed, the bookshelf width can go straight into the distance z, which actually is called amplitude z. This attribute is reused, and it has several different names in the interface, but behind the scenes it's called amplitude z. So what we do is we go bookshelf width, and we can click on here, and we can just go amplitude z. And then if I hit 2 on here, we can then select bookshelf width again, and over here we can go amplitude z. And so now, if I move this out of the way, and then if I change the bookshelf width, you'll see that the bookshelf width changes, okay? But the number of books doesn't change, so that's no good. Right, so you may have guessed how this is going to work. We're just going to add a multiply divide node. We need 2 of those. Oops, so I'm just going to duplicate it. And we're going to go bookshelf width into input 1 x, so that's coming here, so we've got 30. Then what we need to do is times this by 2, and then the output, which is going to be output x, because it's 30 by 2, which is the x, y, and z, so the x channel here, and we want that to go into the point count here. And then exactly the same, so it's going to get multiplied by 2 again on this node, so we go bookcase width, which goes into input 1 x, and then we go output x, which goes into the point count. So this little controller here is now powering 4 attributes. So if I move this, whoops, sorry, on the Mac, if you hold down command and then middle mouse, and if you're on the PC or Linux, it's control and then middle mouse, or left mouse or right mouse, you get you get this cool effect. So we're getting more books added, and the width is changing, and everything's staying in proportion. Last thing to do is the width of the shelf, which was done with scale in an offset node. If you remember shelves network offset, we've got a scale of 60 in here. So if I drag this node in, we can use, I've been an idiot. I only needed 1 multiply divide node, didn't I? You can just use the same output from here for this, right? Sorry about that, everyone. No, not that. No, idiot. Same output here to go into the point count. We don't need 2 nodes doing exactly the same thing, do we? Sorry about that. I don't know, honestly, sometimes. And then this output, this multiply divide, this times by 2. So this is 60, 30 times 2, 60. Well done, everyone. We can just take this output and we can put it into the offset input, scale offset 2, which is the z-axis, this one here. No! I've got the wrong things connected. It needs to be the output x, which goes into point count, and then it's output x, which goes into point count. Right. So, sorry everyone. So that goes into the scale offset 2. Right, now I have the correct things plugged in. Ugh, honestly. Right, so now when I select my controller and I change the bookshelf width, the shelf width goes with it. Yeah, okay, so cool. Right, so you have to forgive me hooking up the wrong things there, because I'm not recording this again. So yeah, so now we have a kind of like variable width of the bookshelf, all that kind of good stuff. We can now pop this into an asset. We'll try and do this quickly. So we can go, if I select all 3 meshes here, I can go create assets, create asset, and then I'm just going to go and choose below, include hierarchy below shapes, and we're going to call this bookshelf asset, like so, apply and close. So it gives us a bookshelf asset. Now what we can do is, if I drag the controller on here, and then what other things am I going to want in here? I want to have like some color controls in here, so I just need to start adding some nodes basically to the asset that I want to control things from. And let's say that'll do for now. So now that we've dragged some nodes onto the asset, it adds those nodes to the asset, which means that on that node you can then start right-clicking and going publish to asset on some of these settings. So we go publish to asset, and then we can go right-click, publish to asset, and then publish to asset, say on these two. And then on the bookcase controller, I want to publish the translate and the rotate to the asset. So now if I look at the asset, I've got the translates and rotates, and I've also got like, if I select this, I can say play with the hue of these, and I don't know, it's more easy to see that. So we've now got kind of like got these controls all in one place rather than having to dance between nodes to find them. And then I believe, I'm no expert at assets, but I believe if you go with the control selected, we can go modify asset, advanced assets, node publishing, publish as selection transform, right? And that done, it means that if you, I've forgotten how this works. I've actually forgotten how this works. Oh, never mind. Maybe I'm just not going to be able to show that. Anyway, now something tricky. Something that I wanted to do was I need to get this visibility underneath the bookcase control. Can I parent that? I can. Cool. So if I move this, yes, good. Because when you add it to an asset, it disappears from the outliner. I've always thought that was something to do with black box. If you black box it, then everything disappears, and it means that I think it did work. So because I added this as the transform, because I did this whole modify asset, advanced assets, no publishing, publish a selection transform, when you select the asset, it will then select the transform, which is what this node is down here. So that's what I was trying to do. So it did work. So I did. So I just didn't know it had worked. Cool. So that's done, and then like we can rotate this, and then with our little then with our control on the asset here, we can then. Oh no, we need to publish this, don't I? So I can right-click, publish this to the asset, which means that on the asset itself, we've got the bookshelf width, so that's all good. So that's down here as well, and then we've got this to play with. And then you can like publish as many other assets as you want, like, you know, if you wanted to publish one of the offsets or the lean on these books and all that kind of stuff, you can do. And then, yeah, because everything moves around with it, you're good to go. So what you could do, like a piece of homework would be to add a control for doing the height, which you would need. I think you probably just need to add one, because the height here is 4, but you've got 5 slats, so it would be whatever the height is plus 1 for the number of replicants. So that would be a plus minus node rather than a multiply node, but it's all pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, I hope you find it useful. There was one more thing. I can't remember. Yeah, that's it. There is a limitation, and it's what I mentioned before about the replicator node not having local transforms, and that is that you can't do this. You can't rotate up like that, because if you're using the replicator node, it's replicating in world space, so even if you rotate it, it's just going to replicate straight up, which is no good. So in this situation, for our bookcase here, you can't have a bookcase that's kind of on an angle. Sorry about that. Unless, well, no, that's it. You just can't. So, yeah. So I think the only way to do it would be to have to put one mesh network inside another mesh network. So instead of using replicator nodes, you added that mesh network to another mesh network, and then kind of use the distribute node to stamp them upwards. Anyway. All that done. I hope you found that remotely useful, and let me know if you've got any questions. But that should get you started on creating kind of like a model asset with Mesh that's kind of fully editable in a nice black boxed way. There you go. Hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. See you next time.